Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this July 12th, 2017 day, a Wednesday on our calendar. And you know who I am, Greg Anthony, right here as always, Monday through Friday on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And you can also go to my website. We're running a pledge drive. You can click on ARCTICBEACON.com. And it'll take you to a site that we're just starting. It's in infant stages, but it's a little bit more dynamic, interactive. But press the donate button as this is a listener-sponsored show. We cover really important topics. I mean, how many people are out there every day telling you where this all comes from? Where, you know, we got all these people talking about David Rockefeller and Trump and all the Illuminati, but we never really get to the core problem because you have to mix the spiritual with the political. And once you start tying the Jesuit knot to it all, then you're getting to the bottom of the story. And I've been doing it a long time. And what I want you to do is go to my new website. You'll see it. You can also go there like this. It's Greg Anthony's Journal. .wordpress.com. And what I want to do with this blog, in a sense, as well as doing my radio shows, I want to give you an inside look at how and why I really tackled the Vatican despite all odds, and have went through a series of changes in my life that I don't know, it's like an about face for me. It's like, being a complete different person in a sense, because I started out as a mainstream journalist. And there's a little story on my website, on the new one. It's just a little clip of when I first arrived in Rome. And it's a picture of Stazione Termini. And how when I arrived there, some little voice in my head said, "You're going to be here for a while." And boy, I was there for almost 7 years. And during that period of time, I went there, and I remember first seeing the Vatican and going, oh my God, this is the church I grew up in, because I grew up as a Catholic. But I had strayed away, and I had really no direction in my life. I was going from one story to the other and looking to learn about life, I guess. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And at the time, I didn't realize what lied ahead. And so when I looked at that Vatican building, I remember seeing it in the distance. I said, I got to get there. And I said, well, maybe I can get closer to the church, thinking, I'd gone astray. Because when I was a little kid, I remember I was 10 years old. And right before my mother died, I went to a Catholic school and I ran home and said, Mom, I want to be a priest. And she kind of looked at me. She said, well, whatever happened to baseball? And, well, that lasted about a week, and I was back on the ball diamond, so don't worry about it. So it's an interesting story of how, I grew up being with all of the signs of a Catholic kid. I went through confirmation, communion, everything, confession, First Friday Masses. I mean, the whole shot. And I knew it, I know exactly what to say to the priest when I go in the confessional. And I know, bless me, Father, for I've sinned, my last confession was, etc., etc. So you get these things, and then they give you like these 10 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and I'm going, geez, can't I just multiply, say 1, and say multiply by 5? So you got to go over and over the same stuff. But, so when I get off that train in Rome, and this show basically, I want to give you an idea of how and why I did stick to this story, because I'll tell you what, there were times I would have just rather gotten rid of it, forget about it, and do something else, I'm telling you. And sometimes I even feel that way today. And I want to thank people. I just lost my dog Max, And basically, he'd been with me for 10 years at my side. He's listened to all my shows. And I just lost my other dog, Miss Moose, 6 months ago, and I figured, that was tough enough. But I figured Max would be around for a while. Well, he's a big Malamute, and he was 10. He would have been 10 in August. And like I said a couple times, this was the worst period of my life because it reminded me of the suffering I went through when I was watching my mom die of leukemia. And I watched her go from a very healthy person to like being emaciated. And Max went through the same thing. It's the worst thing a dog owner can go through. And it all started out with just a little limp about 3 months ago. And to show you how quick this spread, maybe it was 2.5 months. They usually give dogs with this kind of cancer maybe 8 months. But this thing was like ferocious. I mean, it was like a lion eating him alive. And it started in his lower leg. It progressed up to his shoulder. And I just watched it. I mean, it started as a little limp I could hardly detect. And so then as it got worse and worse, I did everything I could. And I wish if I went back, because, I figured, he probably jumped out of the car. It happened once before and he hurt his leg, but it just got worse. So I had to take him to the vet, and I went to a number of vets. And in fact, I was at the time living on a boat, deciding what to do. And I was considering moving to Mexico because of the financial situation I was in. But I still enjoyed living on my boat. And probably the reason I left was because I figured, hey, if this doesn't get better, he can never get off the boat. So now I'm sitting here after he just passed away 2 days ago and wondering, what the heck am I doing? The house is so empty. I'm like coming back to nothing. And I'm sitting here going, this is ridiculous. In 6 months to lose 2 of your good friends. And I brought him here because it was a house. He had a garage. He had a nice carpet. He was in my house most of the time until for about 2 days ago he just gave out. He couldn't walk anymore. His legs were gone. Back legs. Nothing. And he was in such obvious pain that I had no choice. And now I've made a nice little gravesite for him. And I got it all rocked in, a lot of nice rocks, and a little bird looking over, got the sculpture of a bird looking over him. And it's just a real empty feeling. But the feeling I had, when I was in Rome was kind of different. I remember it was kind of an exciting time in my life. I was looking for something, and I was younger, and I had more time to find it. So that was good in itself. But what was I looking for? I remember when I stepped off that train, I said, I'm going to make the greatest stories here. I'm going to find the best stuff. And I didn't even think it was going to be the Vatican stories. I thought it was going to be something like, all of these political things going on overseas that people don't know about, stuff like that. But it just completely changed. And my first glimpse of the Vatican gave me that feeling, well, maybe I can get closer to God. I didn't realize they were satanic. How could you realize that? That's like realizing you grew up believing something that was so false that it almost turns your stomach around. And I had been through enough pain and suffering. And I said, man, something good's got to happen here. And so I was looking for all the good things to happen. But they turned out to be completely the things I never, ever thought about. So let me continue. I'm going to try to show you how I felt when I was in my early 30s, just getting to the point where I could be telling all these stories about the Vatican, researching it, finding some things out there that I didn't really want to find out, and all of the tough times that I went through there. I mean, it wasn't all, pizza and happy Italian times. And so I want to talk about the struggles to get to some information that led me to there. But you know what? as I sit here today, I don't feel much different. I feel like I'm lost in this country, even though it's not as far away like Italy. But today, yesterday's show I had to do a little bit about Max, and I was still kind of in shock. But today it kind of sunk in. And I'm sitting here feeling like I did when I walked out of that train station in Rome, in a country I don't know anybody. I know one or two people outside of a few people that I do some legal work with. And I just drove kind of like I was in a fog. That, what am I doing here? And I remember as I was walking from Stazione Termini to a little pensione, and that's a little hotel, so I could find an apartment there with the little money I had. Boy, I couldn't have done it now, boy. I remember I didn't get there with much money. And I figured, well, I'm young, I can do anything, right? You're fearless back then. But I felt the same way. Because I was walking and I'm going, wow, I'm a man. I have nothing here. I'm by myself all the time. And so here I am. I walk into my house tonight. And I get that same feeling as I walked into that hotel in Rome, that first night I was there. No one's here. I'm talking to Max, and he's not even here. In fact, I stopped into the garage, and that's where he spent his last breath, to say hello. And I remember when I was in Rome, I was like sitting there talking to myself in the hotel room, like, what the heck are you doing here? And what a feeling. I mean, it was the same kind of feeling that I have right tonight. And this show, I struggled with. I was not going to do anything. But I said, why don't I just tell the truth about the way you feel after you go through something, that go into the grieving process. And everybody handles death or change in a different way. My way today was like, I'm out of here. That's it. I'm not staying around this place. And then I'm thinking, well, where am I going to go back to? An empty boat? And then somebody said, well, why don't you, you got to just change. Change is important. Just go on, yeah. A friend of mine said, well, come on over, and then we'll go out and have a bite to eat. And I said, okay. And then about 2 hours before, I said, I got to cancel it. I made up some story because I just wasn't up for going out. But I wasn't up for coming home. And that's exactly the way I felt that first night in Rome. But guess what happens? That first night in Rome, I'll never forget it. I said, I got to get out. And I go out and I meet somebody, and I said, I had sort of a job lined up, but when I got there, it fell through. And so I met somebody that helped me and said, hey, did you ever think about working at the Rome newspaper? I said, well, no, I didn't. I didn't even know there was an American newspaper. I was supposed to start with AP right away, and then they gave me some BS story. And I ended up getting with them after about 6 months. So I ended up meeting somebody that night that sent me over to the Rome newspaper. And he said, well, also, why don't, if you need a few dollars, go over to the club school and you can teach English. So within 3 days, I had 2 things lined up. And so life was looking a little better. Now, right now, I'm sitting in a foreign country with a certain thing lined up to make a little bit of money to survive. But it's just as scary, maybe even scarier, because you get a little older and you're not as they say, courageous, right? So anyway, what made it easy was I always had Max to come home to, get my mind off it, talk to him. Moose had left, and I was a little upset about that. Then he goes. And now I'm sitting here alone going, oh my God, how am I going to get, I can't, I have a hard enough time having a relation, look, I'm at a stage in life where it's not easy to have a relationship with a woman when you haven't been with one for a while. So why don't we just lay it all out on the cards on the table? That's what happens. God lays out life for you, and you got to put up with it. But I wasn't happy with him, and said, in fact, a little while ago, I swore at him. And I'll tell you what, that's how I felt when I walked into this house tonight. But I guess the reason for this show is to, in a sense, you hear so many stories. For example, I do stories about the things that are out of your control. In a sense, it's good to learn them. But there are certain things in your control, and I feel as if my personal life is out of control now. And I don't mean in a sense where I'm going to go off and do something crazy. I'm too old for that. But in a sense where I have no direction, in a sense, anymore. And it was funny and people will say, well, how could those animals change, make it any different? I said, you can answer that question, because I don't know. I feel a whole hell of a lot better with them. And so I sit here and I start thinking back of Rome and how I felt at a point where I was just going to leave. I remember there about a week into this when I was back in Rome, and I started working for the newspaper there. I said, this is it. I can't, the money's no good. Here I am in a country, I don't even know how to order food, and I had to learn how to do that. So I'm here today, and everybody's talking Spanish. And listen, I just shut them out because I have no will today to sit there and learn the language. I remember I felt that same way in Italy when you feel down and depressed. And the point I'm trying to make is that with change comes all these frustrations. And then somebody says, well, change is what life is all about. I don't want any more change. I'll tell you the truth. I'm sick of it. If anybody's changed his life many times over, something always happens. If you would have told me 1 year ago I'd be sitting in Mexico, I'd have said, you're crazy. But I'll tell you, when I left for Rome, if I would have said I'd be in Rome a year before I ended up there, I would have said somebody was crazy too. So life has kind of maybe this is kind of full circle for me. But what I wanted to say was, to understand why someone does something, it's important that you let people know who you really are. And the reason is that I'm not just some kind of mouthpiece. And this is who I really am. And perhaps the death of Max and Moose within a 6-month period of time has a good outcome, in a sense that at least when I do a radio show, I can let people know who I am. And that gives a little bit more understanding of why I do stories. Now, when I got to Rome, the hardest thing in the world was changing your belief system. I mean, when I learned of all the corruption, saw all the crazy stuff, I was there during one of the most tumultuous times in the history of that church in the modern day, during the Vatican bank scandal, and I saw it all. Popes, I just came off, I got there right after Pope John Paul I was killed. And then all of this stuff with the Vatican bank scandal and all these murders and all the money corruption and all the Masonic influence. And you saw the corruption and the real satanic deceit of the people I grew up revering. I mean, I looked up to the Vatican. I thought they were like, I remember one time when I was a kid, I used to play with this kid he was a Lutheran, and I felt so much superior. Because I was told from the beginning of my life that this is the mother church, the best church, the only church to be in. And, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. So as I went to Rome and learned the opposite, boy, that was a transformation period. And plus, I was going through a period of my life where I had to learn another language. And I remember the first year, it was so difficult that I remember breaking down and cry a couple of times. I said, I can't go on like this. It's 6 months. I can't speak. I mean, I'm in this kind of world. I said, I can't just have a crutch and go sit with Americans. And every now and then I worked with them so I could speak in English. But I wanted to learn the language, and it was so frustrating because other people were learning it quickly, and I'm going, God, am I a real Dumbo? So anyway, after about a year, all of a sudden I woke up and, wow, I could speak. It was like a miracle, you know? And once that happened, life got a little better. But as I started doing stories, doing wire service stories and other things, even doing a radio show for the first time in my life, I was a kid that I remember I dropped out of my speech class in college because I couldn't speak in front of people. That's when I was 18. And I remember that vividly. I had to retake speech class in my senior year. And so anyway, during this particular time, I'm sitting here, and it's a very peaceful area. Don't get me wrong, but it's too peaceful, you know, an empty house in a foreign country. And I'm going, I had to get here to get him off that boat. But I didn't think he'd go so fast because they give you life, you know, they normally say, and I was praying that it could be a miracle and it was just something that'll go away, but it never did. And I didn't think it would go so quickly. But for all you dog owners out there, let me tell you, this is the worst thing. If your dog has a limp, and he's older especially. Now look, Max had 1 or 2 times in his life he had a small limp because he jumped out of the car. But when they get older and you detect the slightest limp, you take them in right away. And because it moves quick. And there's been more incidents of bone cancers in dogs and people. I mean, every other day. Years ago you didn't hear about all these cancers. So it has to be related to what's in the air. It has to be related to a kind of a slow genocide of suffering. And I'll tell you what, it reminded me so much of when my mom suffered from leukemia, so it was difficult. And I said, man, I ain't going to be able to do a radio show for a week, a month. Maybe I'll quit. Maybe I'll do something else. I mean, what's the difference now? You know? And people go, well, you're overreacting. You know? And I'm going, oh, really? How do you react? The question about grief is you've got to go through it yourself. Everybody goes through it differently. There's no one pattern. And so, unless you do it your way, it'll kill you. So I hope you guys understand that maybe the good part about this whole thing is that you get a chance to realize that behind, you know, the thousands of hours that I've done giving you information about a subject that is so uncovered in this country, so important, that there really is a human being there that understands it's difficult information, that it's not easy to accept. And there's times I even to this day want to just forget about it. Just say, hey, wipe it away. I learned it, I can get rid of it. I don't need it anymore. But something always comes back and says it's important. I always get an email from somebody that says, thanks for doing this for so long. You were the first guy that showed me some truth. And, okay, I got cut off there. I'm sorry. But anyway, we're all out of time for this first half hour. Come back for the second half hour on the Investigative Journal. Got more for you. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. And what I'm going to do is go to a show I did way back in April in the second half hour, because we're talking about Babylon, we're talking about Rome, and I thought this would fit in nicely. So here we go on the Investigative Journal.
Glad you're back on the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here. Go to my website at arcticbeacon.com. You get shows going back over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. Before I get back to the real history of evil in the Roman Catholic Church, he was talking about Babylon the Great and small Babylon being the Protestant churches who have fallen under the ecumenical movement and the infiltration of the Jesuits. Looking at how the Protestants have now don't have protest against the Vatican in their sermons or even anything to do with their churches. They have become more or less the the little sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, the mother of all churches, as Rome likes to call itself. And unless the church you're with denounces Rome, denounces the ecumenical movement, denounces what we talk about here as the Protestant reformers have done, then there's a problem. And so my advice is to always look into the hierarchy of the organization that you're involved in, especially these large groups of Protestant denominations, as well as groups like the Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, etc., as infiltration is rampant in those organizations as well. So that's just my little advice to you and how I interpreted what he said. And I look for true Christian groups out there, people who, and you can be a church in yourself by worshiping. And fellowship means finding those who basically denounce this evil on this earth. And we're talking about that right now. Rome showing the signs and symbols of this evil. Now, when he mentioned Piazza di Spagna and the tiara being placed there, and you could actually see the head of the sun god, I've walked by that a million times. And I am still amazed. When I first came to Rome, I was unaware of all of this. But about 3 years into my stay there, I started to walk around Rome, looking at all of the statues and all of the fountains and all of the little symbols on buildings. And it was amazing how it was all to the worship of the sun god. And then, of course, walking by the obelisk every day, amazing. And every time I look at the one in Washington, then the one in London, I see the triumvirate of evil right before us. But let's get back to the real history of the evil of the Roman Catholic Church. Here we go.
The Egyptians used the Ankh cross. The shape of the cross, made of 2 wooden poles, which the church started to use, came from the ancient Chaldean region. In the Chaldean Empire, the adjacent regions, including Egypt, the cross was used as a symbol of Tammuz. So, it is certain that the cross was made to worship the sun god. The Catholic Church set up obelisks in front of their churches and put the cross on top of them without exception. They put one more symbol on the sun on top of the solar pole obelisk. However, they made an excuse that they put the cross on top of the obelisk to show that they conquered the obelisk, which is the symbol of paganism. However, the obelisk standing in front of the church as a symbol is nothing but a vestige of idolatry, showing that they accepted the sun worship of pagans. The obelisk, the star shape of the divine light, and the cross are idols for the sun god of the pretense unbelief in Jesus. The Pantheon is the oldest monument still standing in Rome. The Pantheon was rebuilt in 125 AD by Emperor Hadrian and dedicated to every known god as well as the sun god, the supreme god of the Romans. Then Pope Boniface IV converted it into a Catholic church. The Pantheon, which once was the temple for the sun god, but is now used as a Catholic church, is famous for its domed roof. This domed roof is the figuration of the sky and the universe. In the center of the dome, There is the oculus, a round opening with a diameter of 27 feet. The sunlight from the oculus is reminiscent of the round sun in the sky. The sunlight coming through the oculus lightens the inside of the church, and it creates an effect of the presence of the sun in the church. We can find the same round shape in St. Peter's Basilica as well. When we look up at the ceiling of St. Peter's Basilica, there is a circle like the sun at the center, and its shape looks like sunlight spreading from the circle. This kind of circular shape can be found not only in St. Peter's Basilica, but on the ceilings of most Catholic churches. Various forms of circle, which embody the sun, prove that the Catholic Church worships the sun. We can find another characteristic of the sun worship in the Catholic Church in their use of lamps and candles. Even in the daytime, they light lamps and candles on the altar. People buy the candles displayed before the statue of Mary, saints, and popes so that they can light the candle, put it on the altar, and pray. When starting the Mass or marching in procession after the Mass, the priest carrying the candle is always at the front. Where does the use of candles in Catholic Church come from? Historian Alexander Hislop says that the use of candles in the Catholic Church comes from pagan rites.
The use of these lamps and tapers comes from the same source as all the rest of the papal superstition. For so, according to the established rites of Zoroaster, was the sun god worshipped. In the pagan processions also at Rome, the wax candles largely figured, accompanied by crowds of all sorts that were initiated in the same religion, all with flame bow or wax candles in their hands. In the Molucca Islands, wax tapers are used in the worship of Mito, or devil, whom these islanders adore.
Catholic scholars also admit that the use of candles in the Catholic Church came from paganism.
We need not shrink from admitting that candles, like incense and lustral water, were commonly employed in pagan worship and in the rites paid to the dead. We must not forget that most of these adjuncts to worship were not identified with any idolatrous cult in particular. They were common to almost all cults.
Candles commonly appear in numerous rites of pagans. And it proves that the use of candles in the Catholic Church comes from sun worship. The Catholic Church conducts a particular ceremony before the image of the sun. Watching their Mass, we can find out that it is closely related to sun worship. At the altar that has the image of the sun, the priest lifts up the round bread. They call it elevation and insist that they offer the bread to God. However, offering the round bread which takes after the image of the sun, and regarding the round bread as the sun god, has existed in the sun worship of paganism. The pillar found in excavations of the Canaanite city of Hazar shows the ceremony of raising the sun disk with both hands in praise. The Egyptians also worshipped the sun, lifting the sun up with both their hands. Is it coincidence that the custom of the sun worship of the pagans and the liturgy of the Catholic Church are the same? On special days, they put the bread in the sun-shaped frame and go parade through the streets for public display. The believers all kneel down before the bread to show their respect and adoration. Curiously enough, the monstrance, which is the vessel used to display the consecrated Eucharistic bread, has a sunburst pattern. On the altar where the priest offers the bread, there is also the shape of the sun. By offering the bread in the sunburst pattern, they worship the sun. Around 2800 BC, there lived a hunter named Nimrod in Babylon, which was located between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Whenever wild animals threatened the people, he protected them with his power. As people respected and supported him, Nimrod became arrogant and incited people to build the Tower of Babel. Come, let us build a tower that reaches to the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole land. Such deeds of Nimrod that were against God has continued even after Nimrod had died. Semiramis, Nimrod's wife, insisted that Nimrod became the sun god. She cut Nimrod's dead body into pieces and sent them to each tribe of Babylon. People regarded the place where a part of Nimrod was buried as sacred. She also claimed that Nimrod was reincarnated as her son.
The sun god Nimrod was reincarnated as my son Tammuz. He who believes and follows Tammuz follows Nimrod.
As Semiramis ruled over Babylon in place of her young son Tammuz, she maneuvered people into worshiping her. Monuments of Semiramis carrying her child Tammuz in her arms were set up all over Babylon, along with various images symbolizing the sun god. The sun worship and the mother-child worship, which was a scheme devised by Semiramis, put down roots as a religion of Babylon. Idolatry stemmed from Babylon, spread to many countries after the Tower of Babel collapsed. It is because when the Babylonians were scattered over the whole world, they brought the sun worship and the mother-child worship. The sun worship and the mother-child worship were assimilated into the cultures and religions of many countries, and they came to have various forms and names. Nimrod, the sun god, was known as Mithra in Persia, Sol in Rome, Ra or Horus in Egypt, and Apollo in Greece. Semiramis and Tammuz, who were the start of the mother-child worship, was called Isis and Horus, Venus and Dionysus, Diana and Attis, and Astaroth and Tammuz, respectively. Besides these, the image of goddess, who is holding a baby in her arms, was venerated in many countries of the world. If so, was the mother-child worship the creature of an age, which was especially welcomed only in Babylon? Surprisingly, the mother-child worship of Babylon has been passed down through the thousands of years and still exists today. In Vatican of Rome, we can find the mother-child worship in its original state. The statue of Virgin Mary with baby Jesus stands in the eye-catching place in the Catholic Church show their respect before the picture or statue of Mary and pray. Even the Pope prays before Mary with his head low. Why do people praise and worship Mary, whom Jesus was? A famous Catholic bishop and writer, Alphonsus Liguori, explained in his writings that it is far effective to pray to Mary than to Christ. In the Franciscan Chronicles, it is related that Brother Leo once saw a red ladder, on the summit of which was Jesus Christ, and a white one on top of which was his most holy mother. And he saw some who tried to ascend the red ladder, and they mounted a few steps and fell. They tried again and again, fell. They were then advised to go and try the white ladder, and by that one they easily ascended. For our Blessed Lady stretched out her hand and helped them so they got safely to heaven. The story which was made by the exuberant imagination sounded, although it was a man-made story. Pope Gregory XVI canonized Liguori as a saint. Pius IX declared him a doctor of the Catholic Church. Now Catholics are taught that it is better to pray to Mary, who is merciful and understands us.
We must never go to our Lord Jesus except through Mary, using her intercession and good standing with him. We must never be without her when praying to Jesus.
That Jesus cannot refuse Mary's request because she is his mother is shown well even through the image of Mary and baby Jesus. In most cases, Jesus is nested in Mary's arms as a baby. This downgrades Jesus to a little baby who is always dependent on Mary and lets people think that he can do nothing without Mary. Today, the Catholics think more highly of Mary than Jesus. They call Mary the Mother of God, which implies that she is above God. Mary as a female is merely a creation who was chosen to conceive Jesus. How ridiculous it is for a creation to be called the Mother of God because God used her womb to be born in the earth. Nevertheless, the Catholic Church venerates Mary as the Mother of God. Mary worship of the Catholic Church reminds us of the mother-child worship of ancient Babylon. Just as Semiramis artfully spread the mother-child worship throughout Babylon when she ruled it over instead of her son Tammuz, the Catholic Church now makes people worship Mary, not God, by accepting the mother-child worship from Babylon. The Catholic Church regards it a great honor to keep the remains of the popes or saints in the church. Since numerous worshippers pray before the remains of popes or saints, the church, that possesses many articles and remains of those who were canonized as saints, is highly valued. have the remains of Mark. Basilica of San Francesco in Italy has the remains of Saint Francesco. And it is believed that the skulls of the wise men who visited baby Jesus are kept in the Cologne Cathedral in Germany.
Okay, he goes on, we're running out of time, goes on to talk about this idol worship of relics and the dead and bones that I've talked about many times, and how Catholic churches sometimes are put on evil places such as tombs and old places of Satan worship.
Okay, so back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.